Some people may consider this a mess, but what you're looking at is grassland habitat, and it is being cut because we're now at the end of the season for rabbits, birds, and other ground nesting animals. And I know the system is working because we have much more manuring from our deer and our ruminant animals. And by the way, I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. This is my backyard, and you can hear the bullfrogs. You can see 2 or 3 species of dragonfly, lizards. There are snakes out here. I rarely see any rats or mice, but I saw a snake this morning, a black snake, kind of a harmless animal. But we do have lots of evidence of ground nesting birds. So this is what I was cutting earlier today. And when we come around here, we can see these little pads. And there's one here, it's kind of hard to see, but it's basically a little nook where the birds nest, and they can overlook areas of, insects, bugs, things like that. You hear the bullfrog? So all up in here are little nests. Now, some of these nests could be rodents. They could be mammals. There are groundhogs back here, but typically I'll also find in a typical nest, I'll find nesting materials in bird feathers. Sometimes I'll find broken eggs or eggshells. Most of the time I just find these little pockets. Now if it's warmer outside, I'll come out here and walk through this and the birds will fly out of it. Now as the temperature warms up though, the reptiles get more active. So your larger lizards, your snakes will get more active. So those birds will finish up their nest and they'll get out of here. And then I'll come in and I'll scythe the grass. Now you can see the grass that's being scythed now. This should have been done a little while back. Usually don't want it to go to seed. And you can see up the hill where the grass is already growing back from being scythed. But I use a ditching blade because I'm on uneven ground. So I have a longer blade that would be more efficient, but it tends to want to be on more level ground. What we're walking on here is uneven. It's a mix of grasses. In some places the hill is slumped because we didn't finish terracing this out. We had some naughty neighbor complaints, and so we decided to go ahead and just stabilize it and walk away from it, just to show you the resilience of this kind of plan. And actually it's so strong that the neighbor's even starting to let their system go back to grass. And the key thing about this kind of grass is definitely you need to cut it near the house. I don't have a problem with cutting it near the house. You don't want the fire risk in the summer. But ultimately, if I cut the grass to the ground out there, then new trees wouldn't come up. So the management system we have here is near the house. I let it grow out during the season in which birds are nesting in it because we have a large number of ground nesting birds. I used to put them in there was like a bird watch program. I used to put it in there, but people would show up periodically when I'd find a bird. And then I'd have to explain to them, yes, I saw the bird. Yes, that fuzzy picture is the bird I saw. No, I didn't misidentify it. Yes, it's entirely possible for that bird to be here. Hang out in the backyard if you like, and you can see for yourself. So it was just kind of creepy, people showing up. I saw some pigeons after a big storm, and somebody showed up and told me how rare the pigeons were and how I need to improve my ability to identify birds. So basically, I just identify them out of the book. And we've had as many as 25 different bird species in this yard since it was managed this way. And as I've implemented the permaculture over a year period. So there's different birds in different seasons. And I'll do a little better job of tracking that. What's one of the reasons I did the naturalist program, so I can improve my skills. But I need to go out and bird with those folks a lot more before I'm going to be up to par. But essentially what we've done is by allowing a mix of grass and weeds and other stuff to grow. My preference is for grass, especially up near the house here. I want a polyculture grass, but for allowing this to grow on these slopes, we've stabilized the slopes from erosion, as well as provided habitat for the local birds. Before I cut through here, there was a bunch of clover, and I had put in wildflower seeds, but the deer will pick out the wildflowers and eat them. So what we end up with is these shelves that are catching water that comes down this hill quite a bit of water will come down this hill, and it's making little basins that hold water for maybe 72 hours at the most. And then it works its way down the hill here where the birds have little nooks and crannies to hide in. And then there's more basins. So you can see water in this basin right here, and it'll be gone in a couple days. But essentially, instead of the water free flowing down this slope, which is a 50-foot elevation change, it comes through kind of some catch basins and kind of zigzags down the hill. And there was a piping system in place, but we had a heavy storm and the pipes blew out, so only a few of the pipes are still there. And then this one right here will drain out in 72 hours, but eventually goes down into the other detention basins. Over time, these basins will not hold water anymore because the roots from the grass will start digging down into the soil and provide a channel for that water to soak in. And you can see some of the birds here. So I've taken recordings of a lot of these birds to try to identify them, as well as watching for them. But we have a variety of habitats here. Now, a lot of folks would be worried about mosquitoes, and mosquitoes are a legitimate concern. However, the habitat has grown up a number of predators, including dragonflies, bullfrogs, water bugs, quite a few things that eat the mosquitoes. So I still add BT to the water from time to time as a mosquito treatment, and that was recommended by the state of Virginia. However, the majority of the sampling does not produce any mosquitoes. I am making extreme effort to make sure that we don't have stuff stored under the deck or flower pots on the deck that hold water, because that is where you're more likely to end up with mosquitoes. But essentially, this management system doesn't take much more effort than we would on a string trimmer. The difference between a string trimmer and a scythe is that the scythe works better in wet grass. So I'm out here after a rain. And also the scythe doesn't require any fuel. There's no fuel other than the calories in my body. And sometimes I have more calories than I need. And essentially, it doesn't hurt to, even vigorously if necessary, come out here and work, because it's really no more effort. It's a pendulum, and the pendulum swings at the end of this staff and just does all the work for you. It really just does the cutting. Now, the key again, we have to allow the seasons to pass and the temperatures to change in order to get the grass where the birds can finish their breeding cycle. And that does cause problems, because if it rains and we have good water, and you can see some of the variations in color where the water comes down there, and we have good nutrients, which is the surplus nutrients on the neighbors' yards, or just in general, there being clover and nitrogen fixing plants in the grass, you can get grass that grows quick. In a few weeks, you can have grass as tall as a person. And so you do need to maintain it on a consistent basis, which I'm not so good at because I got other things going on. But ultimately, if you can maintain, can reduce the grass from around the house, people don't get so upset. And you don't want this type of tall grass in the summer. When it comes summer and this grass dries out, it's at the end of its life cycle, you're going to have problems with fire, or a potential problem with fire. But you're also going to have root systems that will draw back. So what we're actually trying to do is optimally cut this grass so it's about knee high or hip high. We're cutting the grass, keeping it in its growth cycle so that it'll expand and harden off its roots in order to have a much better surface cover. So you can see in here there's a variety of plants here. By cutting it down, some of the smaller grasses are going to overcome some of the weeds, and ultimately we're going to end up with a variety of grasses that, as they're cut consistently, will make a thicker and thicker sod, which will hold the hill in place and allow us to maintain some pretty steep slopes in an area that gets a lot of rain. So we get 44 inches of rain a year. So in summary, yes, the grass looks like it's long, but this is the type of grass that grows long, and it grows quick. This grass can be maintained with regular mowing, but the mowing would eliminate the trees that we want to grow on the slopes lower on the property. But near the property, we do apply regular scything and mowing, but we allow the grass to grow high enough that we can scythe it with a blade rather than having to use a very loud and noisy string trimmer or other mechanical devices, because the human calorie that goes into powering a scythe really isn't that much, considering the scythe, it works as like a pendulum. So the scythe has inertial energy created by the swing, which could often on a hill like this be simply the shifting of movement as you're adjusting yourself walking across the hill. I'd scythe from the bottom up. That way I'm drawing grass down slope behind me, and then my new cuts are clean. And then I'm being very mindful of the wildlife here. If I do find a nest that is still in progress, which would only likely be happening if I had ducks or something here, but I haven't seen any ducks. Most of the birds are going to be done in season because it is the end of May. But if I do find a nest, I'll just work around it. I'll work around someplace else and then just leave that clump of grass up until the birds are finished. But how many birds are hatching out of here? I really don't know. I do know there's some beautiful doves. There's some beautiful, well, doves or pigeons, but there's robins, cardinals, little finches, some yellow finches here when it starts getting warmer. There's lots and lots of birds out here, and my best count has been 25 species. Now, when I moved in, it was 3, and then we started doing these projects and started evolving the landscape. It was originally woods like that down there, but you know, the woods were falling on my house, and the woods were heavily eroded. So by stopping up this area and establishing terraces and establishing this open space, I originally wanted to plant it all out, by the way, so you can see that row of trees down there. There were supposed to be rows of those trees everywhere to kind of restore the property. But again, we had some project problems, and those problems decided to push pretty hard. So we just stabilized everything, wrapped up the documentary, and ultimately enjoy the birds. A lot of birds out here. We also get a lot of deer, and we had foxes and stuff in here, but nothing that's really been a hassle. Like, it doesn't attract rats. See, the way it's open, see, we cut these trails. The way it's open, small rodents can't run across these trails, and the trails cut the sections. So that means that section right there, in order to get down to water, they've got to cross that trail, and then a lot of hawks and owls and other animals predate on them. Foxes will predate on them. There are cats out here sometimes, but essentially, I don't typically find evidence of rodents. I find evidence of birds, periodically snakes, definitely bullfrogs, some big old beautiful bullfrogs back here, and other small amphibians, mostly frogs. I haven't seen too many like salamanders or things like that. Anyway, this kind of system is challenging in an urban space. The new systems we're replicating in the rural areas will be able to go through their full expression from grasslands all the way to forest again. But we'll show you those in the videos to come. If you have any questions about this kind of implementation, or you even have comments, you know, I'd love to hear the comments and hear the interaction, because we are teaching these systems, because this is the future of allowing land to express its natural systems and then cycle through the natural systems to go from, you know, initial disturbance to grassland to scrub forest to older forests, and finally back to these old age forests, which are then ready to be harvested, or otherwise less management is necessary. So that's kind of your zone 7, and then up near the house is more intense, which is your zone 1s. We don't have any gardens left on this property. I've all transitioned to gardens someplace else, and all we have is the grassland left. And so I'm going to get back to cleaning it up, because this stuff will by default grow the way the system's designed. And we don't want it to get too tall, because people will cry and get upset. And I don't want the grass along around my house, because it creates moisture. So the grass is catching moisture in the atmosphere, putting it into the ground. It's slowing and spreading water. But again, if you have all that moisture up next to your house, you're going to have water issues. You're going to have moisture issues. So I clean it up. But I'm going to leave you with a little bit of bird sound. And I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. You can ask your questions at www.prosperityhomestead.org. Simply go to the contact page and ask your questions.